What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It presents Faces of the Moon, our Marvel pair-up series for Moon Knight, along with identity-themed movies like Fight Club or Donnie Darko or things of that nature. Where every week we look at an episode of Moon Knight on Disney Plus and pair it up with a movie that we think would connect with it thematically and discuss why it is. As always, I'm your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And Jamie Durack.
Hello.
And we are talking about episode 4 of Moon Knight today, as well as the movie Donnie Darko, the much more fascinating story of development than I realized it had, and a movie I haven't seen since, I don't know, a decade or two, and it is a fascinating one to go back to.
It is a ride.
So let's dive right on in. Jamie, what did you think about episode 4?
Oh, it's my favorite episode, and not to ruin the illusion of podcasting, but we have seen the one that comes after it, and I would say I even like it better than the following. Episode 4 was, first of all, it was like the first, I feel like, real horror thing that Marvel's done. Like, I was getting scared, and then it took that bizarre twist. It kept reminding me of Buffy, which is a high compliment, and I enjoyed it very much. That hippo, I love the hippo. What a great way to button an episode.
Nice tag at the end there. Like, what the hell is happening? Also, a little bit behind the window, like she said, I have also seen the next episode. I prefer the next episode. We'll get into that in the future, but this episode is really solid. It is a bit discombobulating. It's a bit weird. I think that's why I liked it so much, because it was kind of unlike the rest of the show so far. I did like sort of gives a bit of a adventure, like Mummy-esque vibe to it, especially with having Layla being more so the kind of the focal point and the lead. And I love they build in this first episode, so we get the love triangle that is kind of happening between Steve Mark and she, which also is probably why we're not getting some of the Jake stuff, because it's a little harder to make that a square. It's easier, it's more better story-wise to do a triangle and kind of have it there. So I dig that. But yeah, I dug the episode. And now that I've seen the follow-up, the button and the way that it ends makes a lot more sense, because I was like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah, I agree with everything Terrence said. This felt exactly like Tom Cruise's The Mummy. One of the greatest kicking off points for the dark. It was the Brendan Fraser one. It was not Terrence. That's what we obviously mean when we're talking about The Mummy. Very heavy Mummy vibes. Love it. Anything that can harken to any Universal adventure movie, I'm in. I agree. This was probably the most heaviest horror that I think we've seen in the MCU since maybe the Hulk's first transformation in the Avengers on the aircraft carrier, Vision's face kind of whenever it's been ripped open. But it really kept you in it. Like, we're really kind of pushing the boundary of what I don't know what it is, TV 14 rating is going to kind of do and look like and see. And that's really exciting. It actually really reminded me a lot of the first Doctor Strange, where suddenly we were decapitating people and stabbing people through the heart, and really seeing a lot more violence than we have, trusting that our audience is older or mature, or I don't know what it is, or just not caring, or just having a careless, reckless abandon for young people watching at midnight. Loved the end. I think there's a lot to talk about in just that bizarre Matrix meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest scene we got. A lot of bright white walls. I wish, and I actually have not watched the 5th episode yet. I missed my little midnight window that I usually have yesterday. And so I don't know where we're going. And I do sort of wish we had lived in that space a bit longer, because I thought it was very interesting, and I liked the conceit that we're immediately doubting everything about the show. It is now likely, not now, I guess, but maybe he is insane. I know that's one of the old Moon Knight comics, where we just open up in a similar ward and we spend a lot of time questioning, has anything we've ever seen this character do been real, or has he just been institutionalized from issue 1? So it would have been kind of cool to play in that space, especially with the ongoing horror elements there. We could have got like really Blumhouse and one location, Evil Dead stuff. Would have liked that. But then we get a big hippo. And I've never complained about a big hippo showing up in my day. So it's exactly what I said. I think I said I wanted last week, where I just want to see what more of these gods are doing. I want to see more than just Khonshu. I want to see more than their avatars. Let's really push that CGI budget and give me some stuff. And, the other thing.
It's interesting because I do like the show, but it is very interesting so far that this is the one show that of all of them has had our titular character probably on screen the least. Like Moon Knight himself is not really on screen at all in this series, and especially not in the follow-up episode. Jamie can kind of attest to that. It's more of a character study. So we're sitting here with 5 episodes and I'm like, I like this series, but if you're here as a typical Marvel fan or a person who's not really into these type of things, not having the character in sort of the quote unquote cape mode throughout a good part of this show is kind of jarring, I think.
Yeah. And because like if it feels like very much like that's what you get in an origin story. It takes a while, but he's already Moon Knight, so it's kind of an interesting choice. It doesn't really bother me because I have no attachment to this character, and I would rather see Oscar Isaac's face. But I would understand that criticism. Somebody compared. I saw on Twitter today. Somebody compared it to how Boba Fett wasn't in Boba Fett enough, but I don't think that's a really good comparison because Boba Fett's just one.
No, also Moon Knight as a character, the costume of Moon Knight isn't in it, and it's not the costume of Moon Knight nor Mark Spector's origin, but we're following another identity, and it's so much that character's origin. And Oscar Isaac has been in almost every single scene of every single episode. I would say comparing those is a little off. It also reminds me, when it first came out in theaters, somebody told me they thought The Social Network wasn't Jesse Eisenberg's movie because he wasn't in it enough, which is a movie I love. And I was like, I don't think people know what main character means.
Right.
Because how is this movie not about him? If somebody was like, Moon Knight's not about all of these different identities running around in Oscar Isaac, I'd be like, how is that true? Every scene connects back to him. The agency, the motivation of everything links back to Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think we're about to get even more of him because there's that weird shaken sarcophagus in our last frame that, Indeed. All of our things will be answered in maybe in a week. For me, it's just sitting on Disney Plus. An unopened Christmas gift. It's really the Red Ryder BB gun of my queue right now. It's just behind a tree, and I haven't seen it.
It's there. You just haven't seen it yet.
But yeah, it continues to be great. I know it's a little harder to go back in time when we've seen episode 5 and ponder what this hippo is, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
What's the hippo?
Like, oh no.
Clearly, I had looked it up earlier and I didn't write it in my notes and I forgot, but it is another Egyptian god. I'm sure there's a big explanation for that. And I get the sense that it's more revival or love or life or whatever we're getting to. And this is going to be he's going to wake up in that pool shot and have a second chance. And other allies must be coming and realizing that Khonshu didn't do much wrong because, there's a giant, what I believe to be a fire goddess coming that's basically going to do Minority Report, but for the world. Okay, I'm going to judge your scales and your wrist and then kill you if I think you. I'm pretty sure that's Minority Report.
That is Minority Report, yeah. Yes, it's hard because Jamie and I've seen it. You have some tidbits there. You're heading sort of in the right direction. I will say that I think the hippo was very jarring at the end, and I think if you kind of what I originally thought is because we saw that hippo in the store in the shop, like when I thought he was imagining it was a part of his brain. It still feels in that vein, but I always thought that he was placating that, like he's putting that up there. It's kind of like we made this something in my life. I've put this as the beacon of that, and it's going to talk to me back. That's what I thought was at the finale. So that's kind of what I envisioned, and it was more. I ended up being more than that, but it still is sort of in that same vein a little bit as well.
Because I also was like, maybe one of the other gods chose him as their avatar to just kind of be like, you know what's going on, and I'm going to use you the way Khonshu was using you.
Right.
We can trade avatars like Pokemon if we're both in this little room. So I loved it. The episode, the show continues to just be so unique and different, and
it's so unlike anything that we've gotten so far. And I actually think that's the case with all the Marvel shows. They've all been very different from the other, which is pretty fascinating.
But I'm also enjoying that this one is a little bit, I don't want to say smaller because that's the wrong word, but like, you know, WandaVision was so high concept and everything else was kind of building the world and still teasing Julia Louis-Dreyfus and the multiverse. And I sort of am like, oh, this almost feels like I'm at a phase one, a jumping on point. I don't need a lot of it. I'm sort of kind of just liking the grace of having a story where I'm not connecting every piece to another piece. But I'm going to love doing that again the next time I do it. I like all of my ornaments on the tree. It's not Christmas. 100%. That's my second Christmas reference. But that's the episode. I know you guys you've skipped ahead. But that brings us to Donnie Darko, an early 2000s movie with a very unique director who pretty much did this and Southland Tales and dipped.
Said bye.
I did not know this is the same director as Southland Tales. You just said it, and it makes so much sense. My God.
Context for that comment and why I know that so well. The first time I saw Donnie Darko was in my very first film class, and we used it. My teacher's example was we're going to talk about studio interference and times when maybe you don't get to do whatever you want. Because he made Donnie Darko, which we watched, and we're like, this is amazing. And then he was like, yes. Then on his next movie, he was allowed to do anything.
Whatever he wanted.
And then he made Southland Tales, the time-traveling movie where Sean William Scott, for lack of a better word, has to avoid touching himself. And Justin Timberlake sings, I've got soul, but I'm not a soldier. And The Rock is there?
This is a reminder to our audience to go back and listen to our Southland Tales episode during Loki, because we did do an episode about this.
Was it all on? I thought we just kind of brought it up.
Yeah.
I thought we. Are you sure? I thought I watched it specifically for this.
No, I think we just touched on it because
I
would have
definitely brought it up, and then you were like, "I need to go rewatch Southland Tales."
Okay, we definitely talked about it. So,
but we do. I mean, I'm sure. I like to bring that movie up whenever I can.
Well,
it's
this
often why my
podcast is the reason
don't work out.
I've seen. All right.
Got to bring in Southland Tales. But it's great. It wasn't a troubled production and it wasn't a troubled release, but it had the unfortunate reality of being a movie where a plane falls out of the sky
directly after
September 11th attacks, causing the movie to not be advertised. It has since gone on to be a cult classic with one sequel that I've never seen.
I have.
And apparently, have you?
Yeah, it's bad. But it's the same actress that's the little girl is the older sister, and she's back. And it has nothing. Richard Kelly nobody has anything to do with that. But yeah,
Samara.
Yeah.
It's called Darko, which is yeah.
I read on the Wikipedia in preparation, and then just got lost in the trivia. When asked if Richard Kelly had ever seen Darko, his response was like, no, they didn't call me. I wasn't involved. I don't understand why it even exists. I'm never going to watch it. I'm not a part of it. I want nothing. And as recently as 2017, he did start talking about a sequel, which because in a conversation he had with James Cameron in 2010.
It's nuts.
Where James Cameron was like, hey, I don't know where they were. I have no context for this conversation. But apparently old Jimmy C walked right up to him and was like, hey, I watched your movie. I thought it was great. I don't get the ending.
I don't understand it.
What's going on? Donnie Darko, Richard Kelly apparently explained to him the ending, alleviating any fan theories. I'd just be like, this is what it is. Don't be nerds. And to which James Cameron was like, oh, well, you got to make another, man. That's fascinating. You got to do it. I think you can go even bigger than this. I think you can make something huge and unseen. And apparently he has been working on this
He's been
sequel ever
scripting it.
since.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there a confirmed fact of how this movie what happens? Because like I was like guessing, I have ideas, but has he said specifically?
He travels through time in the wormhole. It is, I guess, just a random happenstance that happens. The choice pretty much being like either you can go back in time and die, preventing the death of your sister and all of these other things that happen in the movie, or you can sort of like keep trying to figure yourself out.
Okay,
And
that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's why when he wakes up, he like laughs because he just kind of all like
he knows that he's like, I gotta.
I thought that was it, that he chose to go back to like save everybody. But my only thing that I'm like confused about is if he goes back, does the plane even crash? Where does the plane come from? Is it just for an alternate universe that it falls through? Because if his mom and his sister aren't on the plane, then the plane can't fall into his house. But maybe I'm overthinking it.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, it could also just be that like that specific plane and that specific flight, Final Destination style, was going to pop.
It's going to fall no matter what. Yeah.
Okay, so
a fixed point in the timeline, if you will. So the
I believe that.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't do like too deep of a dive. I just know that he was like, yep, he goes back in time and dies.
Okay, I feel good about myself then. I feel like I got what was going on.
But this was definitely a thing that had a lot of talking points. People were like, no, this is what this is. This means this. This means that. I'm like, okay, you guys are doing a lot.
I do feel like this would have been just as good for our time travel podcast as it is for a duality podcast. Like it almost feels more time travel.
I had that thought rewatching it because I think in my mind I was so fixed on Frank and Donnie's dynamic and his journey with medication. But it is at its core really a time travel movie, because even like how Frank works and operates isn't so much his psyche or anything. It is remnants, I guess. Like he does have the bullet hole in the theater. It is much more, it's like a little bit of both. It's like a very weird,
because some of Frank feels like Donnie's id. They use it off of like him reading the book that he's reading from Drew Barrymore's teacher, which she's a wild ass teacher.
She's my favorite movie teacher. I love her.
But some of those things that he's doing are like the quote unquote dark side of his brain. So it kind of does give a little bit of a duality sense for that part.
It almost feels like in a Moon Knight way, where he already has these mental problems, and then the time travel is like Khonshu, where it's good to latch on to someone who's
already broken
loose.
a little.
It is just very interesting even watching the movie with like looking at it as like a post 9/11 movie, because it sort of accidentally opens with like very patriotic America first politics and American flag imagery, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of like accidental parallels that aren't even plain,
not on purpose.
I didn't even think about this. So this is the first time I've watched it since high school. When I saw it in high school, it was probably at that point 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And so like none of this clicked with me. And I'm like, oh God, yeah, all of this makes so much sense. I just popped in a movie. For the record, I really enjoyed it on this watch. I think I get why it has such a following.
I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting movie.
It's very angsty. It's very much of that time where we were all kind of like mad at the world and like, F this, like the Patrick Swayze speaker who has everything. And you always wanted at one of those little seminars when you're in school, want to be the kid that just gets up there on the microphone and just rips that person into a hole. Like, yeah, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. Shut up, get out of here.
Speaking of Swayze, I forgot how stacked this cast is.
Oh, this cast is insane.
It's amazing.
Like Seth Rogen just happens to be there.
In the back. But you brought up Drew Barrymore, and you're right, an unhinged teacher when she tells her to sit by whoever she thinks is the cutest.
I was like,
you can't convince me that that's not her character from Never Been Kissed, just sort of being like, no, it's cool to hit on the students and the teachers. It also, like, in a weird way, it kind of kept throwing me because everybody looks so young because like, duh, it's 20 years ago. But I think because like Drew Barrymore's company was the one that was like, we'll make it. And then she was in it. I think they like they like aged her up a bit to be the teacher for Jake Gyllenhaal. And every now and then I was like, why does she look, but everyone else is so baby faced? But she's either will never age.
She's a witch.
Yeah.
Because Drew definitely is like at this point, like I'm looking at her now, I'm like, she has not changed much from then to now, but Jake was a child.
Well, I think because Drew Barrymore, we've known her since she was like 4.
So we've seen her.
Yeah, and she's in it. Like, what is she now in her 4? And she's in her 4, like,
like
30s to 40s. I feel like you're not aging as much.
Yeah.
As you are, and we've just known her for so long that it makes sense that to view her that way.
Yeah, but people kept just showing up on screen. I'm like, I forgot. Like Noah Wild. Like, what is who's not in this movie?
Also, the mom, Mary McDowell. Mary, why is her name escaping me? The president from Battlestar Galactica, who I love, and I'm McDonald.
Yeah.
And I was excited to see she's great in that movie too. I really love her. She's like a good movie mom, just like Drew Barrymore's a fun movie teacher.
I somehow, and I've seen this movie a bunch of times, and I think it's because I have not seen it in the last decade when she's become I completely forgot Jenna Malone was the female actress in this movie. I completely forgot it. And I was like, oh yeah, and she looks like a baby in this movie.
Didn't she just like stop a rob? She like did a citizen's arrest recently.
Really?
Someone was abusing a dog. So I'm making this up, but no, Jenna Malone definitely had just did a citizen's arrest like within the last month.
Good on her.
Yep. Yeah, it's like a lot of very interesting. Yeah, it is definitely. I mean, a movie where you can like sit and theorize and go through. 100%. Because it even touches on like multiverse stuff. Like Frank's warning about this like Kang the Conqueror tangent the whole time, but then we sort of mix in what's real, what isn't, schizophrenia, Fight Club stuff, and then like very literal time travel. And I think when I was younger, I sort of liked the theory of like, well, it's wish fulfillment. He wants to see that portal over his house. He wants to go back and save his family, but he obviously can't, and that's why he's laughing and it falls, and we see this world. But then I guess in As Darko, the whole movie is like she's sad because her brother's dead.
Yeah, so like it's a lot more linear. Like the time thing doesn't really happen. It's sort of the same thing that happens with American Psycho too. When Mila takes over, it just becomes like a straight story. It's like, we'll borrow a couple of things, but ignore all the poignant points that we had with that.
I once watched American Psycho 2 with my grandpa on cable. A very fun memory.
That movie is terrible as well.
Yeah, but it's I mean, it's still interesting. There were some things in it where I was like, I mean, it's a little, you could argue it's a little like anti-medication and help, where I was like, there's a lot of like, what are the pills doing to them?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't know if I like this in a 2022 world, but whatever. It's still great. It has cool horror beats and weird theater scenes. And how come in every movie where a couple goes to see a matinee or a late night special like Evil Dead Grindhouse movie, they're the only two people there?
There's no one else in the theater?
I saw a Letterboxd review that was like, there is no way in any town a Halloween showing of Evil Dead is going to be empty. Like, no. There's no way.
No.
And I'm glad it wasn't just me, because I was just sitting there with my roommate like, it doesn't make any sense. But what doesn't make any sense really is that it always happens. Well,
then his ability to return, and I was like, none of this part doesn't track at all. Like, all of this is weird. Richard Kelly also did The Box, which I know no one else saw.
Oh, I did not see that.
It was Frank Langella. Like, he was a person that was going like from door to door and like having people like play with this sounds terrible, but playing with this box. And like Cameron Diaz, and I think Cyclops. I'm saying Cyclops. Scott Marsden, I believe, was in that too. But it was a weird. And that was his last film he's ever done. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think he's pulled.
I'm James Marsden. Sorry.
Yeah.
I said Scott. I missed Scott Summers and James.
Yeah.
It happens. Everybody's very tired. It's hot in LA. I don't know.
Yeah, we're struggling.
We've just been working our 9 to 5. Everyone's very sleepy. Who knows what's real anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, but still love Donnie Darko. It's great. I frankly kind of would like to see this weird, bombastic, James Cameron inspired, larger than life.
Yeah, I would love to see what a
like,
big version of Donnie Darko is, because I think some of what makes this work is that it is so small and independent. I don't know how you make this large and it still holds some of that charm.
Well, it's also kind of like, James, what do you mean? Are we going
Blue
to see
people.
a bunch of portals open in the sky? Like, is it a more hardcore? Are you trying to get the Terminator in there? Or are we?
That's what it is.
Like,
also,
is it going to be
if it's not Jake Gyllenhaal, I don't want it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would watch little Samara. I would watch her as like a grizzled Sarah Connor type, mad about time travel. I would watch T2, but it's this movie. And then the bunny shows up in the mall and the shotgun gets flipped out and he says something about coming with me. And the audience is like, what? He was the villain last time and now he's the hero? I think it's going to be great.
Yes, and we all will be bunny rabbits for Halloween. It'll be fantastic.
I'm waiting on it, 20 years in the making. So how then do we think this pairs up with our Moon Knight 4? Because I know we all sort of went into it with just being like horror
beats, yeah.
But I think the Moon Knight episode is scarier than Donnie Darko.
Yeah, it didn't work. I think because when I saw it younger, it had more freakish moments. The freaky points weren't as bad for me this time as they were before. I do think there's a lot of sense of. It's hard because I feel like this episode actually fits better as we go along with what happens in the next episode, because there's a lot of questioning about self and who you are as a person. There's a lot of self-reflection that I think this movie asked the audience to do and asked Donnie to do, and that is where this is leading. It seems to be that's where we're heading with this series as a whole, is kind of be like, who are you at your core? And that's kind of, we don't get too much into it in the back end of this episode, but that's sort of where that is leading to, and it kind of opens the door for the future. I think there's a lot of Donnie is figuring out self. We all were at that point in time, like, who am I as a human? Like, what am I doing at this age? What does life mean? That's what this movie is at that age, and that's sort of what happens as we continue on with the rest of Moon Knight, without giving away too much for those who haven't seen the next episode.
Here's some multiverse thoughts for you. The girl in school who has a crush on Donnie is in WandaVision, is one of the neighbors in Westview. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting sort of digging in, and I again have not seen this fifth one. But I think like the horror beats are at the top. Like this is, as we said, the most horror-y, but this was so much more, not body horror, that's the wrong word, but more like adventure horror, creepy creatures, crawly things. And this movie, Terrence, you're right. In my younger lifetime, I was much more scared of just the imagery of Frank the Bunny. But there was something watching it this time where I was like, the tone of this movie is so unsettling the whole time, in almost a like John Carpenter way, where just something sort of always feels off. And I think that's very similar to how Moon Knight's been, where we're sort of the whole time being like, something's off. And it's interesting seeing how they even can like shoot and change it up that way and what that means for the narrative. But it also deals, I think, with the sacrifice and these sort of deliberate choices that a version of your identity is going to make to let others, loved ones, live and get away. And that kind of the weird struggle of almost like healing with your identity. Like we're sort of starting to see Oscar Isaac in this one
to become sort of both a realization of their other half, but also a coming to accept the other half. That's kind of what happens, and that's Darko works in that way too.
Yeah, I think you're seeing different ways, like different routes of it, but it's interesting when you start kind of looking at it. And let's not forget the giant hippo at the very end at the post credits of Donnie Darko.
Hippo and the bunny.
And Hippo and the
Who
bunny.
will make a
Right
comeback in our epic.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have a crazy looking animal talking to you, then are you really living? Are you really doing life?
I mean, I've been saying that for years. Yeah, I think that's all I've got for old Donnie and Moon Knight this round. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add or.
No, it was fun. One of my favorite things about this podcast is revisiting movies I haven't seen in a really long time.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be the case for our next movie.
I enjoyed going back for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also was very excited to revisit this. I hadn't seen it in long enough that there was just like almost the ending. I even forgot. Like I was like, oh yeah, he goes back and the jet engine falls. And I was like, oh, but it's sort of all about this car accident. He shoots the guy in the face and then he carries her. And I was like, this is a pretty intense, like wild, like it's intense to watch. It really like has a lot of heavy stuff in it that I forgot about, with other characters and reveals about their true nature. I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of dark things that go down in this place.
Mm-hmm.
Just like in Moon Knight, where there's darkness forever because of the moon god being gone. Will he be back? Terrence and Jamie know, and I don't. That's it, guys. We will see you next week for our next episode, the 5th episode, the penultimate episode, as it were. And you can, of course, leave us a review on iTunes and Spotify and wherever else you're listening to your podcasts. You can follow us on Hollywood ADI. I'm at, as always, Blake. Terrence is at Terrence Tatum, and Jamie's at Jamie Cinematics. Terrence operates the Hollywood Already Did It YouTube page with all of his trailer reactions, episode by episode recaps of. I don't even know what shows you're watching at the moment.
I just started We Own This City. So that's HBO Max from the creator of The Wire. I just started that now.
Great. Did you do Our Flag Means Death, Terrence?
I did not.
Oh, but it's so good. You should.
It's a delight. And Jamie, of course, is on the Phase Zero podcast on comicbooks.com. And we will talk to everybody next week.
Later.